The Solid Waste Management Authority of the City of Crescent City and the County of Del Norte, State of California is now meeting in regular session. Only those items that indicate a specific time will be heard at the assigned time. All other items may be taken out of sequence to accommodate the public and staff availability. So do we need a roll call or anything? Do you want to call roll? Rose, please.
Commissioner Nia?
Here.
Commissioner Hawley?
Here.
Commissioner Murray? Murray?
Here.
Commissioner Schlong?
Here.
Commissioner McClure?
Here.
Commissioner McNamer?
Here.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Here.
Thank you.
And
Commissioner Hawley?
And I'm here also.
Thank you. Chair Hemmingson?
Closed session? No closed session today, or? Okay. I will open it up for public comment now. Any member of the public may address the Solid Waste Management Authority on any matter on or off the agenda. After receiving recognition from the chair, please give your name and address for the record. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes. If there's anything on the agenda that you're going to speak on, I will allow you time to speak at that time. Is there any public comment other than what's on the agenda? Mr. Miles.
I'm here today to speak as a member of your Solid Waste Task Force. I want to thank Mary Wilson for the number of hours that she and a working group have spent the last couple of months ever since we had our town hall meeting going over some of these ordinances. I think we all want a clean Crescent City and Del Norte County. But I hate to say this, and some people are going to frown at this. I think we've got to the point where we got the garbage Nazis. And something needs to change. You can't have a number of ordinances that the county and the city, because they're different jurisdictions, have established, and then you create a quasi-government body by forming a joint agency and doing another layer of ordinances. I hope that as this meeting goes on and there's some discussion, that as a body made up of both the city and the county, you start to think, do you really need so many regulations? You have the state regulations, you got the Fed, EPA regulations, you got the city ordinances on garbage and blight and nuisances, and the county has the same. Then I think it'd be helpful using the concept of a carrot and a stick in education. Thank you for listening to me today.
Thank you, Richard. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing no other public comment, then I'm going to close the public comment period and get a report from the Solid Waste Task Force.
Let's see, our last meeting was on July 12th, and we meet on the second Thursday of every month.
And at that time, we had a report from the director going over really the operational figures for the authority, just to get a familiarity for all of the task force members so they understand really the kind of the income and the expenses. And at that meeting, we also started the 5-year countywide integrated waste management review process. And again, that's mandated by the state that it needs to be turned in once every 5 years. So we're hoping to get that done by June of this year, and then all of the different elements that are required in this plan, this integrated plan, is to try and get us to a percentage goal that the state requires as far as the amount of garbage, and it's not called diversion anymore, but the garbage and recycling. And then we also went over the mandatory commercial recycling program, which you guys have in your packet today. And basically, we received a draft that was put together by staff, and this draft was in your packet that you saw. We went through this draft that you will be reviewing today, and we did made some recommendations and some changes. And what we did was we contacted several different authorities around the state who had already put together a plan such as this. We asked for copies of the plans, the task force did, and then we reviewed what our local staff had put together against what was happening in other areas. And basically the analysis really came down to the fact that the other jurisdictions were putting forward not only the the state asked for 3 things, and you need to not only to educate, you have to monitor and then report. And what we noted was that in our ordinance from Del Norte County, there was a 4th section in here which was on enforcement. And again, upon review with the actual state law, the state law does not put any requirements for enforcement. And so that was taken out. And so the one that you have today has been changed in a few different ways, and we believe it's puts us in compliance with the state law. And again, I hope that the way that this is done, it will encourage businesses to recycle, and I don't think it would put the agency at odds with the businesses, but it's more of an ally position so that the agency will be educating and monitoring and reporting. So again, that's why that step was taken. Next, we went into these subcommittee reports, and as we've been working on the ordinance, we haven't had a lot of time for some of the other subcommittees, but again, we've been directed here by this board to collect information on strategies for the sustainable funding for this authority. So that has been an ongoing, been getting a little information in at a time from other agencies around the state and how they are, sustaining themselves. The big one that we worked on for a subcommittee report, let me give you a little history on this. Basically, the local task force was authorized, and it's been written by the JPA that the task force review and comment on this ordinance 2008. And also to conduct, we were empowered to conduct community workshops. And when I was seated in March of this year, and the new task force members, that was already on the agenda. So we proceeded to set up a workshop, and we received a lot of very valuable community input. After that, we formed a subcommittee made up of a civil engineer, attorney, Richard here, and to review the details. And today, I'm going to comment on how we collected the data to analyze and review these details, and Unfortunately, though, as the full task force has not met at this time, we can't. We didn't take any action on approving our analysis. So at this time, I'm only going to state the scope of the procedures that we used, and I will give my personal analysis under the public comment time. But again, that's for me personally. It has not been approved by the task force. So because this ordinance is 24 pages, we took this ordinance and we put it into a grid format. So everything in the ordinance is under this section here, and then we proceeded to make other analysis both on a micro and a macro level. So for this first column, what we did is we went through the ordinance, and some of these things that you'll see that are pink here, those are things that are mandated. You shall do this. If you do not do that, you're out of compliance, and possibly a penalty could come your way. But this first column really puts forward what is already covered by the state law, and then we reference the different state laws. In the second column, we put forward the County of Del Norte, the nuisance code, garbage code, and we cross-check that against the ordinance for duplication as well as for conflicts, which there are conflicts. And then the third one here is the city, and we went over the city health and safety, garbage, refuse, nuisance code, hazardous materials discourse, and noted what was already covered by existing code as well as the conflicts. An example would be the city code in chapter 8 states that the owners or tenants are responsible for a property, where this ordinance makes the responsible party the landowner. Another example would be under the county code. It states that the hearing officer is vested with the sole discretion to determine the civil penalties. And then this ordinance here, it gives the authority determines the appropriate penalties under section 11.05. So there's a conflict between the different ordinances. And of course, there's also cross jurisdiction. In fact, it's happened where one citizen in the city was cited not only by under this ordinance, but also under the city ordinance. So again, who do they reply to? And are they being penalized twice? I think it's this board here would need to maybe get some direction from legal staff. What supersedes what? I know that does this supersede the county code, the city code, state law? There's a place in here that states that if the franchise changes, that will supersede this ordinance. So it's not really clear. And I would hope maybe that, actually I was talking with the city enforcement officer, and he said that this ordinance sits on the shelf and it's not being used. Also went to the county website to look up the nuisance ordinance, and this is not the one that pops up. So again, it's unclear. I'm hoping that county council could maybe clarify which one supersedes. And since a lot of it is the same material is dealt with, and now maybe that both boards are sitting together, it would be a very good opportunity to resolve any conflict that exists in this arrangement. So on a macro level, there are again over 80 plus different mandates in this ordinance to go over, not including the civil or criminal penalties that are in here. And so the task force did develop a working knowledge of these larger issues and going through the detail. And on the macro analysis side, what we weighted were the public comments from the workshop are in here. We had 2 interviews with the city code enforcement officer, an interview with the county roads department, and did a comparison of the goals of the existing city and county ordinances, in addition to a review for I called it reasonableness. I didn't really know what to put in here exactly. So again, the county health and welfare, the goal is that the Board of Supervisors are stating their stated goal is to minimize the burden placed upon property owners and taxpayers. And it doesn't really go along with this ordinance. So again, it's something that needs to be reviewed. And since the task force did not have an opportunity to vote on this, I can't give you a report at this time. And again, I will state my personal opinions during the public comment section. I did, one thing I got kind of last minute was we also got a report from the County Roads Department on trying to figure out, you know, if this is, if the illegal dumping is going up or down. And anyway, okay, I think I got it all in. Any questions?
Great, thanks, Mary.
Oh.
Yeah.
I have a couple
Kelly?
questions really quick. You said you wanted to get your review of a document done by June of this year, and I'm sure you meant something else, so.
Oh,
Since we're in-
is it the 5-year review?
Yeah.
So actually, come to find out, there was a very loose deadline of June of this year, and fortunately, Ted has been in contact with the agency, and they stated that if this were completed by December of this year, that no problem, so.
Okay, and then you said that on your subcommittee there was an attorney and an engineer. Can you tell us who those people were?
Karen Sanders is an engineer, and then Vicki Dickey is an attorney.
And Vicki, are you licensed in California? Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a couple of questions and comments. First of all, thank you for your report. Have the new members that the city appointed been notified of your meeting times, and have you given them documents that would help prepare them to be on the task force?
I haven't heard anything from them at all. I haven't received any notification at all in regards to if it was voted on.
The new members were just approved by the county at our last meeting this morning.
Oh, this morning, okay. Well, the city approved some previous to that, so I just wanted to make sure that they have the same information that you all have been working on for a while now, so that'll help get them up to speed.
I haven't, you know, even when someone
Okay.
has stepped down, I didn't even hear about it other than through the grapevine. I
Okay.
don't seem to get direct communication, so I didn't get any
Okay,
information
so-
on that.
All right, and then you had in the mandatory commercial and recycling program, it's identified for an active list of businesses in the city and the county. And maybe you could talk with Bill Renfro, because I know he's working with Rural Human Services to put something like that together so you don't have to duplicate your efforts. Maybe there's something you could work with them on together. Might save you some time. And then your comment about the enforcement issue, I think that's already addressed in our new contract with Recology, so.
In regards to the mandatory plan?
Right.
Yeah, again, our feeling was, number one, you know, in submitting things to the state, they're going to bind you. And so then to put forward, you know, what the state is asking and not to add in extra sections that will bind, you know, particularly this county, and, you know, they're not giving any funding.
Well, I know, but it's already in, we already have that in the Recology contract.
This,
For like
this
the
mandatory
multifamily
plan?
recycling.
I'm sorry?
We have the multifamily recycling bins that are provided, so it's kind of.
So it's not necessary then, yeah.
It's in there, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll just tell you real quick who was appointed for the city. It was the 3 that applied.
Okay.
So it was Patricia Black, Vicki Dickey's son Ralph Dickey, I think is his name, and Wes Nunn.
Okay.
If
Thank
that's
you.
helpful.
And they were just approved this morning from the
Okay.
county, so there would be no, right, yeah. Okay, thanks, Mary. Any other questions, comments? Okay, thanks. Okay, we are going to, we're not going to have anything on the consent agenda. The minutes that we had in our packet were draft minutes, and there were some corrections, so we were going to approve those minutes at the next meeting. So we'll move on to the director's report. And I think everybody has in their packet the claims, monthly cash charge reports, revenue comparisons, treasurer controller's report, and the report on tonnage. So
I really don't have anything to add to what you have. I'd be happy to
Okay.
answer any questions.
Is there anybody that had any questions on any part of that director's report? Any public comment on anything that was in the director's report? Okay, we move along. We have no agenda items for either the landfill post-closure or collection franchise, so we'll move on to the transfer station. 6.1, discussion possible action regarding a budget revision to provide the June payment to Hambro. Kevin.
Right. This is cleanup for last fiscal year. The approved budget had $1.8 million in revenue and expenditures to pay Hambro, and their revenue actually exceeded that number. So we need to add numbers to both sides of that equation so we can make their June payment, so that the staff would request approval.
That's pretty close. $48,000, that's
Pretty
right in
close.
there.
Pretty close, but I think they still want to get paid.
Yeah. Can't we just call her good?
Yeah.
What the heck?
Should I take that as a consensus?
Yeah,
Consensus direction?
close enough,
Call
huh?
it good?
Okay, so I would entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve. Or don't we have to?
Have a
Yeah,
motion? And a second. Any public comment on this budget transfer? Okay, seeing no public comment, then we'll bring it back. Any questions, comments from commissioners? Okay, seeing none. Rose, would you please poll the vote?
Commissioner Murray?
Yes.
Commissioner Schlong?
Yes.
Commissioner McNamara? Yes. Commissioner McClure?
Yes.
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner Ania?
Yes.
Chair Hamilton?
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner McClure? Yes. Okay, thank you.
Did she call you,
I think it's one vote.
Leslie? Okay. I get confused. It goes everywhere. So.
You don't get an extra vote as a coastal commissioner.
Yeah, you could vote for David or Donna, either one. Okay, very good. Moving on to 6.2, discussion on possible action regarding consideration of the potential savings from reducing the hours of operation at the transfer station.
After the budget was approved and in the conversation of talking about our budget, this is actually a continuation of looking at contingency plans. I don't think there was an intention that this would be adopted today, although it was in the paper today and I got several calls commenting on it. It's prudent to have backup plans, and I think Mike's suggestion to look at what would happen, what would it mean, how much could we save if we have to cut back staffing. I really only just looked at this one suggestion, but there are other alternatives that I think the board may want to discuss in the future. The savings for the reductions that I identified would be a little more than $12,000 in gate staff time. The effect on the public would be being closed on Sunday, and that would be probably the largest impact.
Kevin, there was one thing that came to mind after we had set this for agenda item, and I know that you know, we've talked about this, the pay equity or whatever you want to call it, or mirroring the counties, the way that they do their payroll or process, and the county has taken several or a couple of different cuts, I believe, and also furlough days. But we haven't seen that same mirroring at the transfer station. Now, I'm not suggesting that we close the transfer portion or the weighing portion, but is there a way that we can reduce the administrative part of that, put the administrative staff on furloughs, and while leaving the scales open? Is that a possibility?
Anything's possible.
But is there problems?
There will be problems with productivity, and you should be aware that virtually, well, you're talking about 4 office employees that all of them, in one way or the other, provide backup breaks or lunch support for the staff that are working. And every weekend, we have one of our administrative staff, Ted, Rose, or I, on call to provide support because we're open every day, so we always have to have at least one gate person, one extra staff person to cover breaks and lunch and management. So we're already stretching to cover 7 days, reducing, well, let's start with the idea that the county started furloughs because of budget issues and difficulty in paying the salaries. The last meeting, the board approved a budget which covers all the salaries, so there is no immediate need to make these changes. If there was an economic crisis and we needed to reduce staffing, I would absolutely suggest that that should be put on the table. I'm not going to recommend that there's a necessity to do that right now, but that absolutely is a possibility. If we were to face an economic crisis, either due to further reduction of disposal or funding, then I think that would be fair and appropriate to put both of these items on the table for consideration.
Okay.
Mr. Sheriff,
Comments, yes.
part of the suggestion of the request was as an analysis of one, I was actually hoping for more than one page as to how the options, how you arrived at the options. I mean, how did you determine it? Is Sunday the slowest day of all the transfer station days? It's not. It's probably the busiest. So I don't know why you'd shut down that day versus like a Tuesday or when. What's the slowest day? What's the least volume on a given day, average?
I'm not sure that there's an absolute day that's the slowest. It varies a lot. Weekends are quite busy and are.
Yeah, sure. And my thought also would be is if I would.
But I will answer your question as well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that is the analysis of going further. Also, is like Chair Hemmingson's saying is the pain would be this is a contingency plan basically. It's not put in effect because the budget's balanced at this point. But contingency would affect all staff. It wouldn't just be the gatekeepers. It would be admin as well. I would assume that, I mean, the same thing at the county. When, I mean, everyone's taking a hit across the board. It's not a one group of employees. It's share the pain.
I think that's a fair point, Mike.
Yeah.
I wasn't absolutely clear on what you asked for, so we listened to the recording and I responded to the specific thing that you said, which was
So, but the question is,
reduced
how'd
operating
you arrive
hours.
at Sunday?
I talked to the collection company to see when they would be least impacted, and they run collection routes on Monday through Friday, generally. They have some collections on Saturday as a general rule, but when there are holidays, that whole Monday through Friday schedule shifts, and all the collections happen Tuesday through Sunday, or Tuesday through Saturday. So Sunday is the only day that the franchise vehicles don't have to have access. That's how we zeroed in on Sunday because of the relationship with the franchise.
Mr. Hawley.
Yeah. Kevin, I was looking at the options that you have outlined here. Are you, am I wrong in thinking that you're saying that closing every Sunday would only save $12,000 per year? That can't be.
Closing every Sunday would save $8,280 in staff time. And that's with the assumption, which may be a flawed assumption, that it is possible, and Amy is prepared to comment on this, that if we were closed Sunday, the business on Saturday would pick up to the extent that we might have to have extra staff on Sunday. So the actual savings may be less than that.
So
These
wow,
are,
that's interesting.
it doesn't
I
save.
think it'd be way more than that. Okay, thank you.
Well, those are the staffing costs. And closing at 4 p.m. saves about $4,000, and closing on the 2 extra holidays doesn't save very much, about $300.
So the 12 is all three combined.
All 3 combined.
Wow.
How can closing 2 days only save $300?
It's just the amount that our staff get paid.
Because they're just looking at gatekeepers, not looking at any other staff.
Okay.
It's only two days out of the year.
So 2 people, 2 days or something?
2 people, 8-hour shifts, $13 an hour.
So you did not consider administrative staff?
I was asked to look at the possible savings from reducing the hours, and now you're asking me to look at the savings from administrative staff, and I'm happy to do that, but
So administrative staff is already off on those particular days?
The holidays.
well, all staff is off on the 2 paid holidays, so we pay gate staff to work on those days, so there's a cost because they get paid the holiday and they get paid to work. So that's the savings for those. The weekend days, well, the staff that you're talking about that cover on-call on weekends don't get paid extra. We're salary employees, so.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to open this up for public comment. Mr. Lonsdale.
Well, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Phil Lonsdale, and I live in Crescent City. The comments that I'm making are not really for myself, except as general observations, because I'm very well satisfied with the policy that
I don't think his
But at
mic
first
is on. I don't think your mic is on. Oh, thank you.
At first blush, it strikes me that unless there's something in your package that I don't know about, that really there's not enough information available to make a decision at this point. I would guess that you don't know how many people would be affected by a Sunday closing. I'll bet that you don't know how many people who take their stuff over there after work would be affected by the 4 o'clock closing. And those are statistics that your board needs in order to make a decision. It also strikes me that the way this is structured does no damage at all to commercial haulers, but it has potential for damage to self-haulers, the residents of the city and the county who take their trash over there. Now, if this is designed to drive them into Recology service, that's not necessarily a bad thing, except they won't be happy about it. The other observation is that if you close on Sunday, as Mr. Hendrick already said, and I'm sure it's going to happen, you'll have everybody and his brother over there on Saturday, and you'll have a line out all the way to the street, and you're probably going to have to put on somebody's extra. So how does that cut into the savings if you do it that way? So, and the final thing is, if I were sitting where your board is sitting, I wouldn't make this decision without having a public hearing on it at a time when people can make it to the public hearing, like after 4. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Miles.
I'd like to make a suggestion that when Kevin gave his presentation to the solid waste staff on his budget, we all know that the revenue going over the scale is down. For public convenience, I think the main transfer station should be open. But you have a transfer station in Klamath, and you have a transfer station in Gasky. They have to be manned so people can pay. They don't get that service for nothing if they drop it off at those 2 locations. The true reality is you're paying salaries to man those 2 stations. When we developed our transfer station, that was supposed to be the main collection. That's what the people were sold on in the public meetings, that we'd build this wonderful transfer station that's mainly set up not for the trucks, it's for the self-haulers and the registered self-haulers. So if there's any true savings that may have to be made, you're paying staff, and most of the time it's either Ted or Kevin to man those 2 other stations. You need to think about, can you still operate those 2 stations at a cost savings, or is it time on the weekends to close them and force people to come into town?
Thank you. Any other public comment? Mr. Larson.
Andy Larson with the county. I'm all for saving $1, but we're making ordinances for the unresponsible or irresponsible people. And I'm all for cutting expenses as best we can, but you shut down how much dump is going to go on the side of the street because irresponsible people aren't going to wait until Monday. It's going to be more convenient to just go dump it on the street. I will change my schedule even though I work 7 days a week. If you're not there, it'll make it a little bit inconvenient, but I will be responsible enough to do it. But our biggest problem is the irresponsible people that are dumping. So if you're not open on Sunday, say hello to the roads.
Right. Thanks. Oh, Ms. Dickey.
Victoria Dickey in the county. I read in the paper about...
Can you pull that mic up a little closer to you, Vicki?
Okay.
Don't be afraid of it.
Is that better?
That's better.
I read in the paper about closing the dump on Sunday, transfer station. When I was a kid, we had a dump. You know, people drove their stuff to the dump. Monday, it was closed. Tuesday through, it was open. And you walked over and you put your stuff in. There was one guy who was there. He went through and he sold the Christmas lights and the toys and whatever he could to make an extra buck. And I don't know that he was paid very much. My dad used to go up and substitute for him so he could go off. My dad didn't get paid anything. He was just a farmer and he did that. The whole point of what I'm saying is that you have to meet the people's convenience. Saturdays and Sundays is, in my opinion, kind of a crazy time to close. I think that you should be open later in the day rather than, you know, you're talking about people who work, hopefully people who are working, more and more aren't. And a lot of people work 8 to 5 and they may take their trash out to the dump. They can't do it if they get off at 5 o'clock. They can't do it if they get off at 4:30. It doesn't sound like it costs much to keep it open a day. What, $72,000 is about what I'm extrapolating from what I heard. $12,000 a day, and it's a Sunday.
I think $12,000 was the total savings.
Per year.
Per year.
Yeah, so you multiply that times 7 days.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And then, I mean, you can close it all the time, save a lot of money. But, I'm sorry. But it doesn't sound like it costs that much, so it sounds like it's a thing of scheduling. I'd love to see it so that people can get there when it's convenient for them. People will do that which is the most convenient for them. And closing on Sunday is one of the days they're off. Saturdays, they're off. Mondays, the restaurants are closed. I mean, everybody knows the restaurants are closed on Monday, most of them. And so, you know, pick a day, Monday through Friday. But Saturday or Sunday? And closing at 4? Excuse me.
Thank you. Just sounded like you had something to say, so we appreciate the information if you've got it.
I'm Andrea Wadsworth. I'm a gate attendant at the transfer station. I can tell you,
Don't be afraid of it.
a day after the holiday, I've had 279 people, and it does take 2 staff members to run a day after a holiday. If you close the transfer station on a Sunday, we're going to get double the people. It will take 2 staff members, 1 at the keyboard, 1 running tickets, and vice versa, getting the change from other windows. It does you need a team player to do this, and it will back up the lines, and it'll make long lines for people that have businesses. They're paying that hour person to stand in line, and if it gets out to State Street, they have a wait. And that employer then calls and complains, or they're complaining at us because our flow isn't going. There is not a slow day. There might be a slow hour, but there is not a slow day. We got all the self-haulers from Brookings that come down and use our facility. It's cheaper than they can dump there. It's a flow when it's convenient for them. We got all different types of people. So I don't know what the best solution is. By closing on a weekend or closing early, it's not a good solution.
Not a good idea. Thank you. Appreciate your comments.
Jerry?
Any other comments from the public? Oh, did you have a question? I'm sorry.
Yes, I did have a question for, what about morning hours? Is it because of the trucks that?
In the morning
that
time, a
use
lot of the businesses load up all their stuff. You have the commercial compactors coming in. You got all the roll-offs that have businesses out in the community that have dumpsters everywhere. They're coming in. Plus you have all the landscapers coming in. You have all the businesses that are self-hauling now. They have dump trailers, they come in. You got all the, I'm thinking like landscapers with all their brush. I mean, we got construction companies from Brookings all the time. So self-haulers for like just 3 or 4, it's the retired senior citizens that aren't working. It's the business people or the working people, weekends. COs after 2, we're slammed till 5. So that's pretty much Del Norte County.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions?
We have a lot of garbage.
They're recycling a lot though. They're doing a good job. Is there any other questions?
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I do want to mention sometimes when they're coming in, they have 4 and 5 different items. So they do have to reweigh for metal. People are recycling it. That does take time. It's not like they're coming in, throwing it over the wall. There's few, but they are. Then they have to stand in line inside the gate to reweigh to go to the next one.
Right.
So they don't just come in and go out. So they're reweighing 3 and 4 times, so they're still there. So it does take time.
Perfect. Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, to bring it back to the board then. I personally don't think we have enough information to make
Well, it's not
any-
even listed as an action item. It's completely inadequate in analysis-wise. I mean, I don't know how you arrive at those options. To me, it's what I was looking for as a contingency plan. What if the budget gets worse? What are the options on the table? And shutting down Sunday, I mean, has a conversation occurred with Recology of saying, could we maybe move the days and shift it so it goes Wednesday through Monday as pickup days? Or, you know, I mean, if that conversation hasn't happened, then I don't know how we've arrived at the summary of, 3 phrases basically as the option. It seems really inadequate to come to any kind of actionable conclusion. I agree with Mr. Lonsdale.
Commissioner McClure.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. I am trying to put my memory back to what the original question was, is what it would do, what is the cost for reduced services? And that was the question that was posed at our last meeting. And this is an example of what it is for reduction of service. And that was the question. It was a very narrow question. And when I quickly do, looking at June, I can do looking at the daily ticket sheet, it's an average of 164.1 tickets a day, loads a day that are coming throughout the week. And I can't find a day of the week that has a low average, because it varies. There was a short day on a Friday in June that only had 89. But then there was another Friday in June that had 200. So for me, I would not want us to see any day of closure. I would also like to point out that there are employees at the Klamath and the Gasky transfer station that are part of this same, it's not management every day there. And I would also like to say that if the discussion were to take place of furlough days, you would need to, our members are members of an association, and that is a negotiated item. That's not a arbitrary decision of a board. That's a negotiated contractual item. that would need to be addressed in that manner. So I would like us not, I mean, I understand that we want to look for contingencies at the just in case. So far this year, when we're looking at our projections, we're doing fairly well, and it looks like it's going to be okay. So I would like us not to take any action on this, but I am frustrated in what I appeared when I think that staff has been given a direction to answer a specific question, and the next month the question is then expanded, is I'm finding that frightfully frustrating, and would like us to be a more solution-oriented rather than trying to hammer it home. So,
and I certainly agree with you, but you know, Supervisor Sullivan brings up a good point that this is totally inadequate. If you're talking about only saving $8,000 a day by being closed 1 day a week, that would extrapolate to $56,000
exactly.
a year.
And the question posed was, what would happen if we did a reduction of service? If we reduced time, if we reduced days, or if we closed 1 day a week, what would be the outcome of that? And this is the answer to those questions, which leads me to believe that that would not be an adequate way to address an issue of catastrophic savings. Right there, we know that now through the analysis.
If I could finish my point, $8,000 a day extrapolates to $56,000 a year for the total cost of the transfer station?
Jerry, it's not $8,000 a day.
For a year.
I mean, that's what I meant, $8,000 a year per day. Is that not right?
That's your gate staff.
Well, that's for 1 day, for the full year is $8,000. So if you did that for 7 days, that would come out to $56,000 per year that it costs us to keep the transfer station open. Is that correct? Is that what we're talking about? Because that's what it doesn't make any sense to me, that you can take 1 day out of the equation and only come up with $8,000.
That was my question initially. But really, if you take whatever, really, I guess if it's one person at the station usually, and you take it $15 or $20 an hour, $13 an hour, I was figuring at 15, it's into about $6,500 a year. Times 50, you know, that much times 52 days. So part of my confusion was I was thinking the staff that was behind the scenes doing the work in the building and those kinds of things, that's Hambro staff, isn't it?
Correct.
So that's, I looked at all those workers and I thought there's got to be more savings than that by closing down 1 day. So that was my shortfall in my knowledge that's, we're just talking about the one person at the window apparently.
That's correct. This was just looking at our staffing. The Hambro has separate staffing, and they
But you're not including all the staffing, you are only including either one staff member or, I mean, I really don't know what you are including, and I think that was the frustration that Supervisor Sullivan was coming up with is, you know, how did you come up with this $8,000 when $8,000 for the year for 1 day, like I said, only comes to $56,000 for the whole year for all the days being closed. So that does, you see what I'm saying?
Because our management are on salary. So if we close a day, it doesn't matter to them, right? Because they're on salary.
And that's part of the issue. But I think, Catherine, did you have something? I'm sorry. Catherine kind of raised her hand a second. It's okay.
Actually, I got distracted, so I'll come back and I'll collect my thoughts again.
Okay, I'm sorry. Kelly or
Mike?
Go ahead. I didn't think the question was vague at all. In fact, I asked it over a couple meetings. I was pretty specific about what we were looking at, is if there is a cost savings that needs to happen, how does the flow in the transfer station happen? How can that be adjusted to create a savings in the process? And how do you arrive at those options instead of giving me 1 page with 3 phrases on it? Where is the analysis on this? And I don't want it to seem like it was a vague question. It was pretty specific. And it did happen over a couple meetings. It wasn't just 1 meeting. So I completely disagree with that comment.
Thank you. First of all, it is on our agenda as a possible action item, so that was misstated. And I want us to consider the domino effect that it would not have just on the solid waste authority's staff, but also on Recology and Hambro, because that could impact their operations as well and their staff.
Thank you. Kelly, did you have something you wanted to add?
No, I was just going to say that although I agree with the fact that there's not a lot of information here, you know, like maybe the flow through this transfer station during different parts of the day and what would help you decide to close in the afternoon versus morning, or, you know, the fact that closing on a holiday may not be a good idea because of what Andrea just said. I mean, maybe her information should have been a part of this report. But I do see, you know, that you did some basic research, and I think probably when you see that the actual savings is so small that you probably decided not to go any further. So I think that if the board wants more information, we should direct them to do so. But I agree with Catherine in that there is a bigger picture. And, you know, obviously you got a day from Tommy that would work best for his company. You got an answer from Hambro saying, you know, we can deal with this, but it could impact our company. I personally think for $12,000, I wouldn't choose any of these options. It's not worth it to impact the community for $12,000 for a year.
And I agree. And if we beat this to death enough, we'll move on. Oh, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I'm wondering where this leaves us, though. If we're thinking that we need some kind of contingency plan for reductions, it may not be in the closure of the station, but I think it's incumbent on us to try and figure out some other option.
I agree. I think you're right, and I think we need to look at the real costs and where the cost savings can be. And I would be happy for any suggestions that you might want to throw out there of places we can look for them.
Well, and I'd like to also, as you're thinking about this, if you choose to have them do any further considerations, that these days you're also looking at losing revenue. So if you're closed, so what's that loss look like compared to the cost savings?
Well, and I appreciate Andrea getting up and speaking because she is hands-on. She knows what's going on out there, and as Martha pointed out, it's not one particular day of the week. At some point you're gonna inconvenience somebody, and if we're going to impact people, we certainly want to impact the least amount of people that we can in any particular way. What we've got in front of us, and I agree with Kelly, is not enough savings for us to even consider. So we need to look at other avenues. We need to look at other things other than this particular item here. So with that, unless somebody else has something to say, I'm going to move on. And thank you all. Thank the public for speaking. We appreciate it. We're going to move on to item number 7.1 under the General Solid Waste Authority matters. And we're going to have some discussion on the ordinance 2008-01, which is the Solid Waste and Recycling Responsibility Ordinance. This has come to my attention. I've had several discussions with public members, and I think at this time, I think I'm going to, rather than this commission start off, I'm going to ask for the public to comment on this, on the review of this ordinance before we get into discussion on it. So at this time, I'll ask for public comment. Mr. Larson. Is his mic on?
He's got a low voice.
Okay.
You're on.
You're up.
Oh boy. Okay, where to start? I'm sure you're gonna get to see that bunch of pages. The biggest problem, and it started at it started before the public meeting. Then you get the public meeting, and you get to hear from citizens that this makes the responsible party becomes the party that didn't have anything to do with the trash. I mean, in a way, and I had one guy suggest one time that why not just add to the property taxes? This will clear it up. The whole problem is people dumping, people not doing what they should do, not being responsible. Let's just put it on the property owners and make a tax, a property tax, and then give them free dump fees. That sound good? I mean, you're making responsible people that you live in an apartment house. The rent's gonna be raised when any business, and here we go with business, that's the way of business. They're gonna raise their rates, but then you're gonna mandate that they take recology. Okay, and I've got nothing against recology, but you are mandating, so business now is gonna raise the rent, so who gets hurt? But the people that take their garbage to the dump and are responsible. The people that are irresponsible are not going to they're not going to put it in the trash dumpster. They don't now. It has come to light that you can give people free garbage, and it's being done in Del Norte County already with somebody that's on the task force is responsible for some tenants. Give them garbage bags. They don't put it in the garbage bag. They don't put it on the street, because they get it for free. You cannot make the responsible party a landlord. The responsible party, I take my stuff to the dump. And if I don't take my stuff to the transfer station, then fine me. And I understand, that makes it a little bit more difficult, but a landlord, if I rent, and I want to be a self-hauler, then I'm going to pay twice. Is that fair to me? But I have a right to self-haul. I don't want to be regulated. As Kevin put it one time, I'm a good self-hauler. I'm a responsible party. I don't dump my stuff anywhere. I take it, I sort it. But by this ordinance, I've got to register, I'm going to be monitored, the landlord is going to hit me and force me to take it, I'm going to self-haul, so I'm going to get it again. This really needs to be reviewed on besides that, you are dictating to the public what they're going to do, trying to solve a problem of who's irrationally dumping.
Thanks, Andy.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Mr. Miles?
We have a bigger problem than what Andy's talking about. In Del Norte County, we have a problem with social responsibility. And it starts at a lot of levels. I'm aware that our county, if I want to sign up for welfare, I get credit if I would go out there and do a budget for my utilities. And one of those utilities is garbage. The whole problem here is that you can't become the garbage Nazi stormtrooper. I rent from Mrs. Dickey. Now, me and Mrs. Dickey may have our differences, but I'm a responsible tenant. I even got a dumpster this month and threw out some more of my crap. I'm I'm a responsible tenant. If I wasn't a responsible tenant, state law protects her. But what you people have done is put another layer of law, and California isn't Louisiana. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you might want to pick up your history book. What we need to be doing is finding solutions. Some of these solutions are so simple. Even Ted, after we had our public meeting and talked to the landlords, made it clear. All my landlord has to do is put something in a lease agreement telling me that I'm responsible. And if I am not responsible, state law gives her the authority to evict me. And if the Nazi police want to come after me, that's the way it should be, not going after my landlord. She didn't create the mess. What we have done, and it's like I first said in public comment, you people, of the elected officials of this community, have put so many layers of ordinances on top of ordinances that even as a member of my city staff agrees that it isn't working.
Thanks,
you need
Richard.
to be fixing it.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Mary Wilson. In regards to this ordinance, again, one of my biggest questions is, why is there so much stuff in this ordinance? It is very, very broad and tries to cover so many different things. Not only does it, is there a duplication of what's covered in secondary ordinances in the county or city, or in fact, I don't even know which one's first and which one's second. It's excessive regulation. It goes into, sections about the franchise, and I don't believe that any of the stuff in regards to the franchise really need to be in an ordinance. It's a separate contract that the authority has with the franchise. If they violate that contract, there's contract law for breach of contract. I don't understand why that's in there. As far as construction in here, it's got places in here that each applicant must get a permit for a covered project for the, otherwise you'll be in violation of the law, and it's for the to state what type of materials are used in there. And when you look at covered projects, again, it really goes over anything that's being built, demolished, remodeled. It covers very, very broadly. Again, there's so many different things in this ordinance. I believe it's very convoluted and definitely needs a serious rewrite, if not thrown out and started over. But again, I think that the board really needs to make a decision if how they want to encourage the citizens. Just like Richard said earlier, is it the carrot or the stick? I mean, do we threaten them with jail time? In this ordinance, all of these things that I had put forward that are red, they're misdemeanor, and it states right in the ordinance that unless otherwise specified by this ordinance, anyone who violates this ordinance or fails to comply with any of its requirements shall, upon conviction, therefore, be fined not more than $1,000 or put in jail for 6 months. So you really have to ask yourself, what is worth sending people to jail? And again, the way this is written, it's really not clear what is maybe a smaller infraction and what would be bigger. It's convoluted, and I believe that it would be best for our elected officials to have something that is easy for the layperson to understand And if there's something in this ordinance that you really wanted, I would suggest, again, either getting rid of some of the other ordinances or taking some of those ideas and adding it into the framework that we already have for the nuisance ordinances and making it clean, easy to follow, and not so much of a burden on the citizens of our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Any other public comment?
Victoria Dickey in the county. One of the things that struck me is that the provision 12.05 says that if there's a conflict between the ordinance, which is what we've been working on, and the franchise agreement, that the franchise agreement controls. Well, we've already heard today where now we have an agreement with this group and now, so we can't change anything. I wonder how people can be certain in what they're doing if it is in compliance with the law, if it can be changed by a contract. The contract, the way it's set forth here, what it says is that the contract has to come before the board and it has to be approved and has this, has to that. So there's a provision there that sounds reasonable. The board is going to look at the whole thing, but how is a citizen going to know what you did this morning, this afternoon? Where does he go for certainty? State law is pretty clear. It says, hey, a nuisance is this, you do it. This is the penalty. But they don't go after someone who hasn't done anything wrong. They do have provisions in the state law for landlord-tenant, what they can do. It's very well thought out, very clear. When you start getting into this, even after reading and reading and reading, I kept coming back to the fact that an agreement later made is going to change the ordinance, but it doesn't say how the citizens define that. I think the whole thing needs to be reworked. I think that, personally, I think it should be thrown out and starting all over so you get a comprehensive plan so that we can have a clean community without alienating the citizens, without making them subservient to the trash company. We all want to live in a free society. We want to live where we can comply with the rules. Sandy said he's a responsible individual. I consider myself responsible. Whether or not you tell me to take my trash to the dump, I'm going to do it, and I'll find the day it's open. But I just really am uncomfortable with that provision among a myriad of others. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing no other public comment, then I'm going to bring it back to the commission to see if they have any comments or direction.
Mr. Chair, I'd recommend that the city put this on the agenda to appoint 2 council members, if that's what the group, on our next agenda for August 6th council meeting.
Okay, I had some different thinking on whether to form an ad hoc committee or not, and I hate to put any more problems on the solid waste task force, but they've started, I think, such a good process that I'd like to give them direction. I think solely to bring back a recommendation from the task force alone to this commission, to this JPA, with a recommendation on either amending that ordinance or repealing that ordinance or leaving that ordinance alone or bringing back an ordinance to replace it. And I don't know how much time you think you might need for that. Mary, do you have an idea?
You're going to have to come to the mic.
Come on up to the mic, Mary, because I think I think you've got a good start on it. You got a matrix going there where you're comparing things that maybe are duplicated or redundant, however you want to put it, and on items that maybe are convoluted. So I think you got a good start on it, and I don't want to interrupt that start. And as long as you, you know, publicly agendize your meeting that you're going to have this discussion, you can have public input, or anybody from this JPA could attend and give you suggestions or whatever. But you do make a good point in council.
What was the question?
I don't really know what supersedes what in regards to these ordinances that when they conflict, or which one is in does it take out the county ordinances when there's duplication, which one overrides if the city's not using this one. I don't know what the legal standing is. I would need clarity, you know, in regards to that.
Okay, well, first, yeah, on my own. The city and the county are separate jurisdictions, and the JPA is also a separate entity. So the city code, the city ordinances apply within the city limits. The county code applies in the unincorporated area, meaning everywhere except for the city limits. Now, we've also formed this JPA, which covers both the city and the county. So you're correct that there is 2 layers in each, the city and the county. Now, if you're going to be cited, it depends on who's citing you. If the city's citing you, then they're citing you for a municipal code violation. If the code enforcement officer of the JPA cites you, they're citing you for this 2008-01 ordinance. One of the ideas in coming up with this ordinance was that the authority would start taking over, I guess it would be some of the nuisance issues, and as far as garbage collection and those things, the authority would be in charge of enforcement on those. We've run into some issues with paying for the code enforcement officer, as well as some community discontent with the provisions of this ordinance, so that hasn't been really put into full effect. I think it would be a good idea to either have the city and county, well, it depends on what happens with this ordinance, but to get them to be more consistent is not a bad idea. That's, you know, a good idea. And if we were going to move forward and the authority was going to be kind of the front man on the enforcement issue, then it possibly be a good idea for the county and city to repeal their ordinances in the meantime, since at this point some of them are not being enforced anyways. So right now, yes, there are multiple layers. Depends on where you live and who's citing you. I don't think that you should be cited, you know, by a city and an authority.
But there's a potential at this point. You could potentially be
cited
by...
There's the potential, but ideally they'd work together and decide which was the best resolution.
Yeah, so it didn't happen in this particular case in the city. They did not communicate with one another. So the citizen did not know who to respond to if they were being double penalized. So that's the one incident that I know of that the code officer mentioned.
Okay, Supervisor McClure, you have...
Yes, I would, I don't have any questions for you. You don't have to stand there if you don't want to.
Oh, okay.
I don't have a question for you.
Okay.
Okay.
I have
You're
some
fine.
Statements that
okay.
I'm not making.
Well, I wasn't, you know, I was asking Mary if she had some idea of a time frame on when you could bring a recommendation back to this board if you were to complete your matrix and then take it to the task force and to get their input and then an advice, whatever their advice comes up to for this board.
And I think they should have access to our council because they have all of the background with all of the ordinances and what's legal and what's not, and to provide them with the advice that they need.
Yeah, we actually don't have any resources for the task force in regards to council, which would be helpful.
Yeah.
As far as timing, our next meeting is in 2 weeks, And we certainly can push this to the head to get this completed and then to get a report back. Again, you know, depending upon, we need to meet with council. I feel pretty clear about it, but it seems as if, to me, a decision would need to be made, and it's just an ideal opportunity for this board, who is all sitting here together, to choose, you know, which one you're going to follow, if you wanted to abandon one and go with the other, or, I mean, you know, I don't know if you want to use this information in order to make that decision, or...
Well, I'm looking for a recommendation from the task force. And the reason that I ask for timing is because if we're going to do any changes to the ordinance, according to council, we have to notice a public hearing. So that public hearing has to be noticed 10 days prior to our meeting. So if you don't think you can get it done before the next meeting, then we could push it off to the following meeting. That's all. I just want communication that you can give to Kevin or to myself, and let me know if we need to schedule for a public hearing at the next meeting.
I am in support of the task force coming forward with a recommendation, but as an elected official, in fact, this board used to have a non-elected official on the board, and there was angst that they were making decisions. So I would suggest that if you would want to wait and have the task force go ahead and do their matrix and make their recommendation and come forward with their recommendation, then it comes back to this board, and it should be the ad hoc, and it should be a responsibility for this board if we want to rewrite or tweak this ordinance, because that's what I was elected for, and I do not believe that it would be appropriate for a task force to make a recommendation and then this board to actually do a hearing in relationship to that recommendation. We would have to take that recommendation, and then we can compile that recommendation with the knowledge that many of us have of why we have this responsibility ordinance and why this responsibility, how it could be folded together. Because I can tell you, I too am a landlord, and from the very first day I owned my home, as a renter, as a landlord, we provided curbside service because I felt that was my responsibility. So I know I'm a responsible landlord, but I also know, after going through a campaign and knocking on hundreds of doors, that I have many irresponsible landlords living in my community that are not including in their lease clause a requirement that the trash be taken, and then are not taking the trash. And that trash is ending up in neighborhoods. That trash, I just recently had to go to a constituent's house and visit and overlook a backyard that probably had 200 bags of garbage. And I'm not sure that I, as an individual citizen, should be responsible. There are many communities, like Mr. Larson said, that put it on the tax roll, and it becomes, that's how they deal with solid waste. In this community, we chose not to do that because we felt that there should be people that would be allowed to self-haul. And the only identification of self-haulers are going to be people saying, I'm a self-hauler. And there are many, it's a misnomer that there are apartment complexes that don't self-haul, because there are apartment complexes that are self-haulers. There are... Seawood is a perfect example, and I think I think that the trailer park out at Ship Ashore are self-haulers. So self-hauler is quite allowable as a landlord. Yes, it does, because all they I'm not. I'm going to read it to you right here.
It's not that I don't disagree with.
You can be a registered non-residential self-hauler. You can be a registered residential self-hauler. And the non-residential self-hauler can be the one that hauls. The residential self-hauler can be a complex. It's just that the complex has to have a recycling facility. And that recyclables can also be self-hauled. But the whole purpose of this was years of work. And the reason it is so complex is because we didn't want to leave a stone unturned. The reason that you have the definition of what a misdemeanor is because that's the definition of California Code of what a misdemeanor is in relationship that it can be a fine up to $1,000 and jail time up to 6 months. But that's the definition of misdemeanor. Because if we don't have any teeth in this, people are going to continue to throw their trash. And I'm going to continue, as a citizen of this community, to have to pay for somebody else's trash. And the only way we can tie the trash is to the actual land of where the trash came from. Now, if my renter starts to pile up in the backyard, in fact, there's a vehicle in the backyard that we drove by and said, you know what? They're getting noticed because the vehicle needs to be removed. Because we have rules against vehicles, non-operative vehicles being parked in our yards. We need to get it out of there. But that's because I'm being irresponsible. But if you're going to want to clean up the community, which is, I think, collectively what we all want to do, you have to figure a way you're going to pay for it, and you have to figure a way of how someone is going to be responsible. And self-responsibility, I have people standing in this room today telling me how responsible they are. But I also know that there are people in this community that talk to me today that might own property that might not be as responsible as they should be. So I'm not going to fall for the line of it should be the renter's responsibility, because I have sat up here and have had house after house that someone hired a self-hauler to come and clean out the house when the renter left, and they took it and they put it behind on Elk Valley Road, and they dumped it behind on Elk Valley Road. The self-hauler drove away. The lady said, but I paid this guy in this blue truck to come and take it. Well, if the guy in the blue truck's not registered, we can't help her not be responsible for the trash that just came from her property. And that's why we need to have the registration of self-haulers. Because that's what was being done in this community, is that we were having houseful after houseful of trash. When the landlord would finally kick the tenant out, they would hire somebody to come and clean out the trash, and the trash would end up on French Hill Road. Well, we have to have some mechanism for responsibility. And the mechanism for responsibility is tie the trash to the land. No.
No. Yeah.
Mr. Chair?
It's called election.
I'd just like to add, with the people who are in violation, there's 3 of us that sit on the RAC committee, Mike, Martha, and myself, and there were proposals to remove the trash from forest lands, private lands, you name it, and there were pictures. You would not believe how many violations there are. So, that's one of the reasons that I believe in keeping requirements that make somebody responsible, because otherwise the whole countryside is going to be littered with trash.
I don't disagree with you that there should be a law, and there probably is a law, and there probably was before this ordinance, that's illegal, and it is illegal. The question is this ordinance working, and is it redundant? Does it duplicate other ordinances or laws that are already on the books? That's my question. I've got some real problems with it, because anybody who self-hauls is supposed to be registered. So does that mean that they shouldn't be taking garbage at the transfer station unless you're registered? If you start registering everybody in this county, I think that's going to become a real problem. That's what it says in this ordinance. Everyone who self-hauls has to be registered. That's what this ordinance says. Whether you're a residential self-hauler, a non-residential self-hauler, everybody has to be registered. Andy's a good person, a good self-hauler. Is he registered? I don't know. So is he illegal? He's in violation. Are we going to put him in jail for 6 months because he's not registered? I don't think so.
No, because our jails aren't going to take misdemeanors.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. That's my problem with this particular ordinance. I think it's overbearing. I think that it's in some areas, it's just words that don't mean anything or say anything. I have some real problems with this particular ordinance. This is a personal thing that I have a problem with this particular ordinance. I've read it. You know, I'm not a lawyer. I've read it. There's some things I don't like in it. On the one hand, you can't take away a tenant's ability to self-haul in the ordinance. On the other hand, you make the landlord be responsible for the tenant's garbage. I have a real problem with that. It contradicts itself. It doesn't make any sense. So I think it needs to be looked at. I think if it needs to be amended, let's amend it. If it needs to be thrown out, let's throw it out. Let's make sure there's something in place that takes care of the people that are not responsible, that are taking their garbage and not putting it where they're supposed to be putting it. Let's take care of that. But let's make sure we've got a solution. Let's just don't add to the bureaucracy. Let's don't just add layer and layer and layer worth of penalties that don't have an effect. Is it better now than it was before this ordinance was in place? I don't know. Do we have a way of telling?
Mr. Chair, if just to kind of dovetail what you're saying is maybe the request should ask for the Solid Waste Task Force, because they've already begun to analyze this thing for an analysis and then recommendations back to this board, and we can take it from there. And it may be delete this paragraph, add this, or maybe scrap the whole thing and start from scratch and make the thing as simple as possible, if in fact it's going to stay in place. And that's part of the reason we are amending the JPA, is that it goes through both boards. So you don't have the redundancy that Martha was talking about.
Right.
That all entities have the same ordinance.
Mr. Hall.
Yeah, thank you. I've seen the detailed spreadsheet that Mary has put it together, Mary and the other members of the task force, and I think it's a really good start. I'm interested in seeing the detail about what works and what doesn't work and what the recommended changes are, so that my thought is a spreadsheet like that will make it easier for us when it comes to making changes within the whole ordinance. It's easier for me to see on a spreadsheet than just to see in written form.
How'd you get it?
She showed it to me.
And the task force has the ability for community input too.
I recommended last month when Mary approached the podium and said that there was so much information and it seemed somewhat overwhelming to her. I said, have you thought about putting something in a spreadsheet so that you can break it down in reasonable increments so that we can all take a look at it? And so she showed it to me recently to say, this is the way we've done the columns and this is the way we've done the rows, and it works. So I offered, to assist at least in the spreadsheet kind of things, because that's what I have done for a living for a while. If that would make it easier for the test. Thank you.
Jerry, may I?
Oh, sure.
Thank you. I'm baffled that staff has not a role in this process.
Well, let me make my comment first.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. I was going to say that when this ordinance was being talked about a couple years ago, I was very uncomfortable with it in general, because I wasn't sure putting it on the landlord's the landlord's backs was the best solution. We had lots of discussion and lots of back and forth and lots of public input. There were actually some landlords that appreciated it, which I was surprised with, because they wanted the tool to make their tenants be responsible. And there were some landlords that weren't supportive because they knew their tenants weren't going to be responsible. And so I would love to see a better solution, but I don't know if there is one. So I think looking at it is a good thing. My comment that I wanted to make on top of that was that I think her matrix and the work they're doing is good. I'd like to be sure that it's a quorum of the task force that's doing the work, that makes the recommendation to us, and then also to have the ability for staff and council to review it with them once before it comes to us. And that was it.
Yeah, I would hope that they would use staff as they need it, whether that means council or...
May I?
Sure.
I thought the point today was to go through this ordinance, I prepared a PowerPoint presentation to highlight the points of apparent concern, suggestions on addressing the issues such as your concern about registered self-haulers, addressing concerns about shouldn't landlords allow a lease option for tenants to be responsible. I was involved with the previous task force that spent hundreds of hours on reviewing this. The board at the time spent many, many hours reviewing this, as Kelly just commented on. The current task force is having virtually all of the discussions on this ordinance in a subcommittee of the task force, which staff is not present at. They continue to be concerned, and yet we're not at the table to help explain why we're doing what we're doing. Obviously, there's still confusion over the intent of it. Yes, there's 24 pages, but they've had it since March. And we have not had a discussion with the full task force on this ordinance. The intent, the purpose, the reasons for it. Staff could help expedite the discussion on this if you would allow us to explain why we got to this point. And we do work for you. And we want to advise you, and we're professionals, and we're aware and we're knowledgeable about the issues that are here. And yet we have no role in the process that you just described.
Well, I think you've already indicated that you had a role in preparing the previous ordinance. And it's kind of getting a little bit irritating, because if you had done your job and you'd looked at other ordinances that were in place, we would not have had the conflict. If we would have taken care of the problems that I can see in here, and trust me, it's the first time that I looked at it, that I even knew the ordinance, or that I read the ordinance from cover to cover and found out what is in there. So I'm a little bit irritated that you're being so defensive on this issue when you're the one that put it together, or you helped put it together in the first place, and left a lot of things lacking, in my view. And I don't want to argue with you over the thing. I'm just looking for a recommendation from somebody else to take a look at it from an outside view. All I want to do is get a recommendation. Richard, we've already had public comment on this item. I've already closed it, so you're done. Please stop raising your hand. You want to get removed, Richard? Because that's my solution to you.
Okay, I'll leave.
Out the door. Now.
The simplest thing is...
Richard, leave.
I resent, our meetings aren't secret. Both these guys could...
Richard, I'm not going to ask you again. Please leave the room. Now.
Maybe you need to tell the rest of your meetings how
Richard.
you set up last Friday.
That's Friday.
Anyway, hate to raise my voice. I don't mean to get angry, but I want Richard, please leave the room. Not going to ask you.
Have some balls, Jerry.
Can we remove him from the task force? I'm sick of his behavior.
Anyway, there's some problems that are here that I would like an outside look at to identify the issues. You know what's there. You know why you put it in place. I just want somebody else. They're just an advisory capacity. They're just going to make a recommendation. That's all I want to see. That's my personal view. That's the direction that I want to give. If anybody's got an issue with that, we can.
Well, with all due respect, Mr. Chair, the board itself was the one that adopted the ordinance, not the staff. So if you have any frustrations, it should be addressed to the board, not to staff, because the board is the one that adopted the ordinance.
I don't understand that. I mean, I understand that, but I don't, with Kevin wanting to weigh in on this particular item on why things went the way they went.
Well, you were the one that said that they did it, and it wasn't the staff.
He was involved. He was involved in doing it.
But with due respect, it was the board that made
that approved it.
Right.
And all I'm asking is for an advisory body to give us a recommendation, the same as you would from staff.
And I agree, and I just think that when they go through the recommendations, if they could have staff and council maybe explain some things or answer their questions or give them a better understanding of some things that, you know, I know a lot of times I look at something, I think this is ridiculous, it makes no sense to me whatsoever.
and I have to have someone that knows what they're talking about explain it to me. And sometimes I understand it then, or sometimes I still think it's ridiculous. But to be able to have that expertise, and I do know that Kevin and Ted have a lot of knowledge in this area, and they could answer some of their questions. And maybe the task force says, okay, oh, we understand it now, or we still disagree with it.
Well, and maybe we take it this further, is that the task force continues their analysis and then makes staff available to answer questions as the things come up. I mean, that might be the easiest way, because there might be certain issues is, why is this in here? Why do we have it this way? And staff may have an answer to it.
Well, and that's why if it's going to be done, if the task force is doing it, it should be done as the task force as a whole, while staff is present, so they can help answer questions. Because today I've been told about 6 things that are not the intent and not what the ordinance is about, that have been apparently at a subcommittee of the task force, not the whole task force. So if staff, and I would appreciate the PowerPoint, because I think that people need to, I think that people, I think it helps to educate. At any time you can do the PowerPoint and get educated on it. It might answer some questions right now today. And I also believe that that the recommendation that comes back from the task force needs to be that only, a recommendation, and that it needs to be taken by this board and written into a final analysis as from that matrix and from this. And if that requires an ad hoc to do that, that requires an ad hoc to do that. But that's the process that it needs to follow in order to take forward a proposed ordinance to the city and the county.
I just feel like if Kevin is not made a part of this to begin with for answering questions, that's just going to drag this on longer and longer, because they'll do all their work, then he'll review it, have his comments. We'll have to have another recommendation with any changes that Kevin has maybe made you see have to be in there or could be taken out. I just feel like I can see this going on and on.
I didn't want there to be a misunderstanding. I did not tell them to exclude staff. Staff has been at their meetings as far as I know.
No.
Are you not at the meetings anymore?
Not the subcommittee meetings.
But we're not getting a recommendation from the subcommittee. We're getting a recommendation from the full task force.
Yeah, I was just worried because you had mentioned not having a quorum a few times, so.
It's my understanding, I do have a question for you now, Mary, if you want to come to the mic. And it's my understanding that the analysis, the information, the review of the information, the analysis, and the spreadsheet, the matrix, have all been done at subcommittee, not at the task force meeting. Is that correct?
We have not completed an analysis.
No, the process so far has been only at the subcommittee level, not at the entire meeting where staff is available to answer questions and where minutes are taken and where participation happens.
Portions have been in the task force. Of course, it started off with the entire task force, and then we went into the workshop. And prior to the workshop, of course, the entire task force was brought up to speed with the history of the ordinance, and we needed to be...
But the analysis that has been done so far, the analysis that has taken place on the matrix, was that done with the total task force, or was that done with the subcommittee?
So the information that we've collected, I'm just going to break it up into an information collecting area and then an analysis. We have not done a written analysis, and there's no written analysis at all for any group.
But what you have so far is from...
That's the information we collected. That has been done in the subcommittee. Yes, it's been very detailed.
And that, to me, therein lies a problem, because therein lies a lack of being able to have... You have people who could answer your questions if you were doing it as the whole task force. if you were reviewing that information with Ted and Kevin present, they would be able to answer questions for you or be able to help you reach to wherever you're trying to go. Because when you come up and, never mind.
I think we, not to overcomplicate this, I would imagine the recommendation coming back to this board will be from a vote of the entire solid waste task force. So I would hope before those recommendations is to bounce it off staff and have questions answered at that point prior to the vote.
And since Kevin prepared a PowerPoint, then maybe he could present that PowerPoint to the task force prior or before your meeting starts talking about this particular ordinance, so that he can answer
That's a really good idea.
Okay.
How about to us?
And I apologize for not, I didn't realize that he was going to put a PowerPoint together at the agenda review. He never indicated that he was going to put a PowerPoint together. Otherwise, I would have had that done first, right off the bat. I don't want to drag it into now, so I think at this point, if you'll present that at the next task force meeting to the task force, I think it'd be great.
It wasn't my intent to make you mad at me today. Notice how quietly I sat there?
You just irritated me, and I'm sorry.
Irritation is fine. Frustration on this end, so now we're all clear on our emotions.
And maybe that's a better word, frustration on my end,
But
irritation.
the previous task force was engaged heavily in drafting this ordinance. So, and even if there's flaws in it, it still makes sense to have everybody have some input in fixing it. I understand your concerns. I've clearly heard the concerns expressed by landlords and others, and I could help you move this along if I was engaged in some way or the other, and I will come to every one of your meetings as long as you want me to, and I'll go to every one of the task force meetings unless I'm sick or dead, and I'll come to your meetings if I'm dead, but not the task force meetings.
Maybe I'll see you
But I have not been notified, and I have not been involved at the subcommittee level, so this in-depth analysis is occurring in the absence of understanding of the core purpose of the ordinance, and I think that could be a waste of their time, leading them down a dead end.
Okay, so and if you would, I ask you to please do that presentation, your PowerPoint, to the task force, so that they can have a chance to look at it. Please.
Can we?
So we'd see.
Any public member.
Why aren't we going to do it today?
I'm not going to do it today. It's too late in the day. I'm not going to do it now. We've got other things to go through. I didn't expect to have a PowerPoint presentation. If you want to see the PowerPoint presentation, you can go to the task force meeting and you can see it there.
Ooh.
Okay, so we're going to...
Could email it to us? Email it to us?
I don't know if you can or not.
that'd be good.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Because we want to be transparent.
Why can't you be transparent by going to the task force?
Because I may not be available all the time they have that meeting.
I'll provide it one-on-one for anybody that has time, any board member that's interested.
Can you just email us the PowerPoint?
I'm not sure I can email a PowerPoint. It might be too big of a file, but I can try.
Or just give us a copy.
Sure. It's better with words. I can tell you that.
How long is it, Kevin?
Well, it's a long ordinance, and I just took the highlights, but it's still 24 slides. I mean, I didn't go through every page of it because I know you've all read it now, but I wanted to highlight the points that seem to be points of confusion or points of contention to try to help you get closer to a resolution, because it seems everybody agrees there is a problem with the illegal dumping. That was the intention. Any solution or fix on this ordinance needs to be at least as successful, if not more successful, than this. And if you ask our code enforcement officer, he would tell you that since this ordinance has been enacted, it has gotten better.
Yeah, there have been some very severe cases that it's been very helpful to use. I was just going to say that if the majority of the board really wants to see the PowerPoint, maybe you could schedule it for the next meeting since it's so late today.
I would like to see the PowerPoint, and I would be willing to see it today.
I'm not interested in bringing it up today.
Anybody else?
No.
Everybody's tired.
We can see it at the next meeting. I'm good with that.
Yeah, we have meetings at 6:30.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a meeting at 6:30.
Okay, so I'm giving direction to the task force. Staff, please do your PowerPoint presentation. And Martha, if you could make yourself available. If the task force needs to ask you some questions, I would appreciate that. That's my direction.
To give direction for the PowerPoint to be put on the next agenda?
We can do that.
We can agendize.
Yeah. We'll look at the PowerPoint. At our next agenda review, we'll talk about the PowerPoint presentation at the next meeting here. Okay? We're going to move on to 7.2.
7.2, you may note that the item in 7.2 is related to the last 2 pages on the Solid Waste Task Force agenda, as Mary alluded to earlier, Mary Wilson. This draft mandatory commercial recycling program was discussed in some depth, and I appreciate the fact that they stayed an extra hour to go through this. So what you have in the front of your agenda is different from what you have in the last, and it may have been hard to glean from Mary's comments, but I believe the task force agreed that this revised plan was better. I actually challenged Andy to say something nice about us. Maybe this is your chance. That you've been saving it for this. They made some very specific comments that brought it down to a more bare bones basis. This is for purposes of meeting state requirements, which is separate from the ordinance, and that was part of what we grappled with. Is our local ordinance has some things that we're trying to do that are different from what the state requires. So this plan only has to meet that state mandate. And as Mary correctly pointed out, it's education, monitoring, and reporting. So they actually voted unanimously to delete the whole enforcement section because there was an enforcement section. It's not necessary for this plan. And this is what we need to send off to the state to be in compliance with this state mandate. So staff's recommending approval of this revised plan that has been reviewed and approved by the task force.
So what is the cost involved with implementing this mandate?
The cost for us
or did I hear something about this gets passed on to Recology?
No.
So this is a cost to the Solid Waste Authority with no funding behind it for the monitoring or the education or the identification. You have to go out and identify who needs to comply with this, and then you need to educate them and then monitor them, and they're providing no funds?
Correct.
So is this in our budget?
To date, we have used some of the Department of Conservation grant. We get $15,000 that we've used that for education and outreach. We use that to pay for the ads for the workshop that the task force hosted, which was our large outreach to people that wanted to attend that. But short answer to your question is the state does not provide funding for us to do this, and we believe that the staffing that you have can meet this within the budget that you've approved.
Okay.
I have a comment. I was just going to say that when
Martha and I spent countless hours going through this franchise agreement, part of the agreement in that contract is for them to do outreach and education, and that, I mean, it's pretty detailed in what they do, and it's actually very detailed, and they've done a lot of outreach. I know that they also sent letters out to all multifamily apartment complex owners and landlords and held some workshops directly for those. Yeah, and so they have supplemented that outreach and education by probably tens of thousands of dollars.
That's an excellent point.
Yeah, and I think that's all good, but it still disturbs me that the state sends down these unfunded mandates and expects us to identify, educate, and report, and they don't send us anything to do it with. They just make us do it.
Well, for the
I
record,
just have a problem with it.
this is
I'm
not a law.
saying that we can't do it.
This is not a law this board supported, and personally, I didn't think it was a good idea. But I still like Wesley Chesborough, but a lot of other people voted for it, and it's dovetails with most of the things that we're doing. Our system is a little more complicated because we don't have a mandatory collection system. In some counties, some plans, they basically just put it to the garbage company to notify everybody. Lake County had a plan, and we're not sure if they have mandatory or not, but their plan was basically let the garbage company notify everybody, and that would work, except for the fact that we have all these self-haulers, and businesses can be self-haulers, and so it's a little more complicated. But there's also no penalties for us. We do our best. We'll do the best that we can do to let people know, and I'll agree with Mary on this one point, is our approach should be education and helping, as we have since the franchise rates went up, helping businesses to figure out how recycling might save them money. And probably most importantly, there's no definition of how much a business has to recycle to be in compliance with this. I'm happy that we don't have any enforcement role because it would be impossible, or at least certainly very challenging to enforce. So we're doing all the things we'd be doing anyway. We're letting people know about the services that are available. And depending on what happens with the ordinance, we already have some expectations. And in the new franchise, there already are apartment recycling and business recycling services available. So we did know this was coming. We did plan ahead so that the businesses that wanted to comply would have the services available to be able to do that. So what we're asking today is approve this plan so we can send it off to Sacramento and we're done.
Okay.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Public comment.
Andy?
Here's your opportunity to say something good about.
Excuse me, sir?
Here's your opportunity to say something good about
Well,
Kevin.
that's why I came up here.
There you go.
Could you make it quick? No,
We have disagreed, but we get along, and I appreciate Kevin and Ted. They do good input, and the state didn't mandate enforcement, so therefore I don't think that this county should overstep the state, and I think the research showed us 3 cities that did it: Sacramento, Rancho Cordova, and somebody else. This county doesn't need to go over it. I'm sure the state, it's a state law. But I do appreciate what Kevin and Ted do.
I do too, even though he's a little irritating once in a while. Frustrating, sorry, not irritating.
Yeah, irritating too, I'll buy that.
See, we even smile when we get done.
Andrea, please.
I just have a brief comment. I do think the PowerPoint is a very good tool for the community. The public does watch the channel station. We do go back to our computers to read and watch the video, and as a public person, I would request and respect if you guys would allow a PowerPoint so we can see it from home for the public.
Appreciate your comment. Mary.
Yes, hello. I just have one concern, and actually the plan, I definitely am agreeing with the plan. However, I spoke with somebody this weekend, and he could barely speak because of all of the expletive language that was in there. He was so upset and had been approached by the franchisee, which I know that you don't have really control over the board, but he was told of all the things he had to do to comply, and it was under the understanding, you know, that in regards to the recycling, that it was something that was going to cost him and that he could not meet. So I just wanted to make, I'm sure you guys have it too, as soon as you mentioned something about disposal, some people will tell you what's bothering them, and he was very, very concerned. He has a big business in this community, and so there seems to be some confusion because I explained what the law was, but that's not what he had received from Recology. He was under the understanding that he had to comply and that this was going to cost him quite a bit of money. So I just wanted to bring that separate point up in case any other citizens come to you guys in regards to this. I don't know what's going on.
They do have to comply.
But
State law.
it does, but you only have to comply if you're at a certain level of garbage. So I've had people saying, come to me and say that all businesses have to comply with this recycling. Not that they shouldn't do some recycling, but that they think that they're mandated by this law that they have to do some sort of reporting, and it's going to cost them a lot of money. And if you don't generate 4 yards or whatever the poundage is a week, then you don't have to. You're not part of this law. So, yes, Ted.
If I might add briefly, we have received several phone calls from commercial businesses interested in either following up on the Recology letter or how to comply with this law. Compliance is really easy. We're there to help. 465-1100, no problem.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment?
Was the letter sent out by Recology misleading?
The letter was tailored to the individual businesses. So they laid out in the sample letter that I saw several different options by which businesses could include recycling, and those letters did target businesses that were generating 4 cubic yards or more per week. So it was appropriate that the outreach went out, and they were providing several options, and in many cases, the options included ways to actually reduce the total bill. That wasn't true in every case, but it was true in many cases.
Oh, good.
Any other comments?
Motion on the floor.
We have a motion? Who moved?
I did.
Oh,
Who's second?
Oh, good. We're good to go. We're done with public comment. So, Rose, would you poll the vote, please?
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Murray?
Yes.
Commissioner Schlong?
Yes.
Commissioner Ania?
Yes.
Commissioner McNamer?
Yes.
Commissioner McClure?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Chair Hemmingson?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on, 7.3. We're looking for approval to deposit $11,125 into the account for other post-employee benefits. Motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Public comment.
Oh, sorry.
Seeing no public comment, bring it back.
Do we have the cash?
Huh?
Do we have the cash?
It's in our budget.
It's in the budget, yeah.
Okay.
Is this a 6% increase?
Oh, this is
This is like 25%.
This is about 25% of what we should be putting into that fund, but it is the amount that was budgeted for this year, and it appears at year end that we have both made our budget and we'll have money to discuss reserves at the next meeting. I talked to Jerry about that, but till we get the year end from the auditor, it's hard to say exactly how much extra money. I shouldn't say extra, because when you put extra money into a huge debt hole, it's not extra money.
I'm just glad that we're making some progress.
I think it's important to recognize that you are making good progress, that through your scrutiny and our hard work, we have brought in a balanced budget for 1 year, and that's a good start.
Okay, any other comments, questions? Rose, would you poll the vote, please?
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner McClure?
Yes.
Commissioner McNamer?
Yes.
Commissioner Schlong?
Yes.
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Murray?
Yes.
Commissioner Ania?
Yes.
Chair Hemmingson?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. 7.4. This is discussion and possible action regarding establishing the effective date for the adopted First Amendment to the Joint Powers Agreement and return to 5-member board commissioner to a 5-board member of commissioners. You know, I guess I misunderstood a little bit. I thought our First Amendment to the JPA was creating this board.
Right.
And by doing our last amendment, we removed that?
What you did when it came to the Board of Supervisors and to the City Council was an amended JPA. It incorporated everything up to that point, all of your comments, all of the changes. My mic's on. It didn't occur to me till after the supervisors took the action that it didn't have a mention of continuing the 10-member board, and so in talking to the city attorney and city manager, it was suggested that the city adopt the amended joint powers agreement just as the county did, but direct the mayor not to sign it, not to put it into effect until this 10-member board has finished their business. It seemed like that would be a wrong way for you to find out that this was over. We hadn't thought about it when we were reviewing it or approving it, and I thank God that we caught it before the city adopted it, because that would have been harder to unravel. So it's basically in your power to decide how long you want to do this.
Yeah, in our discussion on the city level, Bob Black pointed out that if we executed the contract, or the JPA amended contract, that it would basically dissolve this 10-member board. And we didn't think that was the intent, and so we chose not to. We passed it with the condition that it could not be executed until this 10-member board had chosen a date to dissolve or be forever, or whatever it is, so that it was this board's decision when it went into effect.
Okay, and I'm still confused, because the first amendment that we made was it not to create this 10-member board? Wasn't that the first amendment that we made?
It was actually the third amendment to the old JPA.
Right. But it was the first, I mean, it was the first amendment that the entire board came to recognize as an amendment to the JPA. Is that not right? Did I miss something there?
I think there's confusion between, there's a difference between an amendment to an agreement and an amended agreement. So the original JPA had 3 amendments. Is that what you said?
2 plus the third. Yeah.
So the original JPA had 3 amendments. What happened with this last one is it became the first amended JPA, so we put everything into one agreement, so we just had one document to follow.
So it did not include that third amendment?
Well, that was the
Well, you can't
discussion
have
point
2
was we were looking,
boards.
everybody was looking forward to the point that it would revert back to a 5-member board. There was discussion about it because you talked about the need to annually appoint the public member
Right.
as the new system.
When we got to that point, and I thought that was going to be at a different point, so I guess I just misunderstood. Probably did.
That's why they're not, that's why the mayor's not signing it,
No,
because then it will hold off.
I understand that, but what other parts of that amended?
What else are you missing?
Yeah,
in the meantime?
what are we going to be missing out on?
Well, you still don't get paid. That one's in the old amendments and the new ones. The process for ordinances,
That's moot.
well, if you want to address the only ordinance we have, basically, you could do that while you're still 10 members, so you have time for that, and I see you trying to move that ahead, so that's good. The other changes were approving the budget, basically clarifying timeframes for that,
Right.
ratifying ordinances, and
So there's nothing significant.
I don't think there's
If we-
anything that's going to stop you from doing what you need to do as a 10-member board, unless
So can-
Catherine goes renegade and signs it early.
I snuck and signed it. No, just kidding. No, we voted, no, we voted to approve it with the contingency that I wouldn't sign it
With this
until.
full board.
Right,
Okay.
so we wanted to make sure
And
that
do we need
everybody.
to set a date now?
No.
Okay, so we just want to set this out into the future.
I wanted
don't-
you
Is
all to-
anybody interested in setting a date at this point?
No.
No, we
Okay.
originally talked about December.
David would, if David was
We
here.
originally talked about December of this year.
No, I know we did, but I'm not sure that we've come to the conclusion that we'll be wrapped up by
You know,
December.
I did have a question, though, that came up as one of the things that we talked about on the amendments. So the way we've amended the JPA, there's no way for future boards to give themselves compensation.
Correct.
Does the bylaws need to be amended then, too?
I haven't looked at the bylaws, but the JPA would take precedence over the bylaws, and the only way to change that would to have the JPA amended again to allow for
Right.
compensation.
You you changed all those words, might get caught, even the one that was hiding someplace.
Okay.
Mr. Lonsdale, I hear you, see you raise your hand. Public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Bill Lonsdale again, and still. As what they used to call an observer of the passing scene, it's been my pleasure to watch the 10 folks that represent us at various levels working together on the problems that Waste Management District had or was perceived to have. But my general observation is, and today bears it out probably as well as anything, is there are a lot of different equities represented among the members of the board. And whether transitioning too soon to a 5-member board would protect those equities is an open question. You've got some very important stuff before you, not the least of which is that ordinance. And if that task force as a whole meets only once a month, it's going to be a while before you get meaningful work out of them, I believe. And it's unfortunate, but that's just the way it is. So I would recommend that what you're already considering is don't do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Roger Gitlin. I remember that meeting. I was here. It was a very hot discussion about stipends, and you voted to amalgamate. If nothing else is clear to me this afternoon, at best it's unwieldy, and I don't think you're governing with 10. So I would recommend you look at going back to 5. And I think what was at concern is not all members of the board were sworn in oaths at the at-large member, not elected officials. So perhaps this board can figure out having 5 elected members, 3 from the supervisors, 2 from the city council, and then alternate years go back, 3 from the city council, 2 from the supervisors, as a way to solve this problem. Because quite obviously to me, it's 10 members on this board is unwieldy and it's not productive. So I think you should reconsider.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
I've mentioned this before, but it's something that comes to mind every now and then. Members of the city vote for people who are on the Board of Supervisors. Members of the county vote for people on the Board of Supervisors. Members of the city vote for people on the city council. So they kind of get 2 votes to my 1. Just a thought.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay. With that, I'm guessing we're not going to take any action. Yeah. And we'll hold that in the back of our, I don't know, we might want to. Hold it in front of there you go. Well, if we're going to take action on it, we just need to make sure it's, I don't think it's going to happen in the next few meetings, so we won't worry about this point. There is no closed session, am I correct? And with that?
Can I just make comment on that?
Sure.
As a friendly reminder that the reason that we were having closed session is because we have had a director's evaluation that has been due since March. And people have not responded to the evaluation and done the necessary work.
There's only, as far as I know, there's only 2 that have been submitted. One of which is not mine, although I'm not going to go back and change the irritation that I felt today, or the frustration. So I'll leave it as is before I turn it in. Anyway, if members would please get their evaluations done, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. And with that, we are adjourned.